For your call, would you like to take that, Dennis?
Yes, sure. Thanks for that, Ernest. The East Side reclamation was specifically one of the sites which UEFA investigated alongside Europa and others, and they didn't feel, for a number of reasons, they didn't feel it was an adequate site. We can have the discussion about where else we could have built the stadium until tomorrow, and it's a very decent discussion to have. It's a valid question. But the fact remains that the choice of Europa was made by UEFA technical experts, and we're happy to go along with their recommendation. That's, for us, really, is the bottom
These guys
line.
have built stadiums elsewhere.
These guys have
stadiums
built
or stadia?
Stadia. And it comes back to Alan's point earlier on. I mean, we shouldn't think about... If our concern with Europa is... one to do with the weather, with the wind, those are valid concerns too, but we have to remember that stadium design has evolved and developed so much that we're not looking at an open stadium a la Victoria Stadium. It's not going to be like that at all.
Will it be roofed,
protected and closed? We're exploring the possibility of a retractable roof, but it would be an enclosed facility with or without a roof, and would be protected and designed specifically to protect it from the wind and the elements. Okay, well, we're talking sports, so nothing too political, but I do have a question which might be a little bit sensitive, but I need to ask it anyway. For you, Dennis, as CEO, the Gibraltar Entertainment Network has on its website links suggesting that they will be involved in some way in the build of that stadium. What's the position? Well, we've had discussions with Jen, and there is, I know that they're very interested in projects in the area, and we're open to further discussions on that and to taking that forward at this stage. I mean, we're open to all sorts of commercial suggestions surrounding our stadium, which would make it a viable project. And by that I mean that it is first and foremost a football stadium, but we're also aware that a football stadium in the modern era can't just live for football. It'll also have to have recreational and commercial activities around it, which would make it a living thing 7 days in a week and not just when there's a match on. Well, a question very much along those lines for yourself and or for Leslie, to do with youth players. Do we anticipate keeping the Victoria Stadium once the new stadium is built? Will a lot of the youth games still be played down at the Victoria Stadium, Leslie?
Yes, most of the youth games will be played at the Victoria Stadium.
Is there enough? Are there enough pitches down there at the moment? Is there a lot of interest?
I think we've already run into difficulties this season with a lack of facilities. It's the truth. We have to look at not just the Europa Stadium, which won't be ready for a good number of years. We have to look at the situation here and now, and the situation is that because of the huge amount of interest in football now, and the amount of people playing the game right now, Leslie mentioned that we had, I think, 700 youngsters playing the game. We need to find a solution because we're lacking space in the Victoria Stadium as it stands at the moment, and that is something we will need to consider.
Okay. On the subject of the new stadium, Alan, what is the preference? I don't know what it'll eventually be, but is a preference for grass ahead of a synthetic turf, or will it definitely be synthetic?
Obviously, I'm thinking about the national team, and yes, I prefer natural grass. Basically because we would probably only be the only national team in UEFA at the moment that would be using artificial grass. So it'll be nice when we're playing at home, but most of the time when we play away, it's going to be natural grass. So in order to get the players used to it, yeah, I prefer natural grass.
Okay, we've got an email here. The email, by the way, is viewpoint@gbc.gi if you want to write in. You can take those in if you like, Alan. David has written in to ask, how does it work? Who qualifies for European competition? I suppose he's referring to the clubs.
To the clubs? I believe at the moment on club it's the winner of the first division will go into the Champions League.
One slot for the Champions League.
One slot for the Champions League, and the winner of the Rock Cup will go to the Europa League.
So that's Gibraltar's equivalent of the FA Cup.
That's correct. Yeah.
So that'll be a little bit more open, I suppose. You know,
yes,
cup competitions often are.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, in a cup competition, in a single knockout match, anything can happen, and it's open to any one of our 20 clubs, the 8 First Division and 12 Second Division clubs, to be able to qualify for the Europa League next season, realistically.
Okay, a question here on Twitter. Is there a difference between GFA and GFA Limited? And I believe that's because the lower thirds that we've used have differentiated between yourself as a GFA Limited employee and Leslie, if I'm not mistaken, who isn't, GFA,
right. The GFA
council member.
The GFA is obviously the Gibraltar Football Association, which is the association itself, represented by its council. GFA Limited is a company created by the Gibraltar Football Association, which acts as the employer for the full-time positions that we've created, and also which acts as our as our financial arm, as it were, the elements of the GFA that has buying power, that will enter into contract and other arrangements with third parties.
Okay. Another question on Twitter from Nigel. This time, will clubs have to change their names? Man United, I believe, already have.
Manchester United already have. I think it's Manchester 62 that they've changed their name to. I think UEFA are quite comfortable with our club's names. I know that, for instance, Lincoln, that there is a club in England also called Lincoln, but realistically, the English Lincoln won't be qualifying for UEFA competition for the foreseeable future, so that isn't an issue at the moment. The main issue was with Manchester.
Lincoln fans in the UK now up in arms.
They would be, yes. I hope none of them are watching the programme. They might. Good luck to them. I hope
unlikely, though.
But the only club that it's affected has been our Man United, and they've opted to change their name.
Okay, as a fan of social media, I'll continue to ask you the questions that are coming through. Martin is asking, do we have an estimate for how much the new stadium will cost, and who will be funding this?
Well, we're still very much at the briefing stage or conceptual stage of the stadium. We're still firming that up and ironing that out. So I'm a bit reluctant to go public on specific figures because those might change, and they're liable to change. And the second part of the question was...
the second part of the question addresses who will be funding this.
Right, the funding will come ultimately from UEFA's Hat-Trick programme, which is an infrastructural a funding programme which is given over specifically to infrastructural projects. We're also hopeful that somewhere down the line private entities will come in with a commercial interest in the stadium that will lessen the impact of that cost to the GFA, and we remain open to suggestions on that front.
Perhaps as a result of UEFA funding, is there an option for more training pitches? Is a question coming in from John on email.
Training pitches are a huge issue at the moment. We're looking at a number of solutions. We would very much like for the National Stadium to be alongside a training facility. Unfortunately, at the moment, that doesn't look possible. So we would have to look for alternative sites for that, or perhaps develop more training facilities within the footprint of the Victoria Stadium somehow. But those are issues that we will be considering.
OK, we've got another call on the line. Good evening to Simi Herbert. Simi, your question or viewpoint, please.
My question is to Alan Buller, the GFA manager. I would like to ask him that there's been a bit of a controversy of people asking if he's going to put foreign players in with the Gibraltar players. Have they had to have a connection with Gibraltar family or whatever, or will he be getting foreign players from outside to represent Gibraltar?
Thank you ever so much for your question, Simi Herbert.
OK, thank you.
We had planned that for the second half of the show, but this being live television, Alan, please answer Simi's question if you would.
Right. Obviously, hi, Simi, and thank you very much for that question, because it's important to actually explain how everything works. First of all, I would give a straight no. I will never bring a foreign player to play for Gibraltar. What I will bring is someone that will have Gibraltar blood somewhere along the line. What it means is that the UEFA and FIFA ruling states that in order to be eligible to play for a national team, first of all, you've got to have the nationality of the country, i.e., in our case, is British citizen. Secondly, you can either be born in that country, one of your parents born in that country, or one of your grandparents born in that country. That means that there's always a bloodline along those players. So, does it make us less? Does it make those players less Gibraltarian than myself? Well, for me, no, because as long as they have a bloodline of Gibraltarian, then they're the same as me. So I've heard things, and obviously I don't go into the social media. I'm only on Twitter. But I've heard so many things. But trust me, First of all, I will always look after the players that are here at the moment, and if I've got to look outside, and obviously I'd be stupid not to look at professional players that can play for Gibraltar, I will only bring what is necessary at that stage. I can say at the moment I'm looking at 3 professional players to bring in. Will it do good for Gibraltar? Yes, I think it will, because obviously people have got to realise who we are up against next year. And if you look at the groups, you'll see we will pick one of probably England, Italy, Germany, those legs, and then we'll go on. These players will help us, not only on the experience they bring, but also it'll help the youngsters, because we've got to be realistic in Gibraltar. You know, we've gone into UEFA, but that doesn't mean that we don't have to perform. And we owe it to Gibraltar to perform. We owe it to UEFA to perform. And most of all, we owe it to all those countries that voted for us to go into UEFA. So it'll be a 10-year plan that we have to play next year. I'll be looking at the best players that have got eligibility and Gibraltarian blood somewhere along that will play, and they will wait for the youngsters to be developed in the right time frame. And the youngsters we have in Gibraltar are going to be the future of the national team.
Well, thank you, Alan, for a very comprehensive answer. We've got some more viewpoints from our commentators on that very subject at the beginning of part 2. But given the interest, we'd like to go back to you guys at home. Clive Mobley is on the line. Good evening, Clive. Can we have your question or viewpoint, please?
Hello, good evening. I'd like to applaud and thank the GFA for all they've done. I think it's been fantastic. And from the chief executive down to the last person in the committee, I think they've done a fantastic job. And my question is to Dennis. Dennis, you've taken a very brave step in some of you becoming professionals, and I think it's the right way of going about it. But now that clubs individually with less resources are also going to participate in Europe, are some of these clubs getting some of their committee to become professionals? Thank you.
Thank you, Clive.
Thanks for that, Clive. It's a very good point, actually. We are working very closely with our clubs to implement the UEFA club licensing system. The UEFA club license is key to be able to participate in European competition. Without the license, our clubs won't be able to enter Champions League and Europa League next season. And to be able to get to that license, a lot of hard work is involved. One part of that is personnel, the requirement to have personnel, perhaps not professional as in paid personnel, but certainly full-time personnel at the club, somebody who can pick up the phone should UEFA have any questions at any point during the day. We are conscious that this represents a huge step for our clubs, and we are very willing to support them every step of the way in terms of pooling resources, in terms of providing the clubs with our own facilities and with our own time to be able to ensure that they obtain the licence and that they're able to participate in the Champions League next year.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dennis. We're going to take a very short commercial break. Meeting the UEFA Challenge. We'll be right back here on Viewpoint.